Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for tuning in once again, and this is my third video. I'm really excited. Thank you for subscribing. If you're new here, you know what to do. Please subscribe, please like, please turn on your notifications so you can stay tuned. And without further ado, let's begin this week's video. I'm going to talk about the 6 stages that we go through in design. And when I was busy preparing the content, I actually realized that I think I should definitely speak about the differences between an interior decorator, designer, and an interior architect, because they are quite different fields and they require quite different skill sets. It'll just be easier for you to understand why we do certain things and why it is important to study interior design or interior architecture. And maybe if you're wanting to go into interior decorating, it's not something that you necessarily really have to study for. I mean, studying is great and you should always study something, but don't necessarily need to. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so this week's video is going to be about design processes, and I'm going to do it in parts because there are different stages in design. So when we talk about design stages, there are 6 design stages. Let me give you a quick overview on the 6 design stages. So stage 1 would be Inception, and that's what I'm going to tackle today. Stage 2 is Concept, which is one of my favorites. Stage 3 is Design Development. Stage 4 is Documentation and Procurement. Stage 5 is Construction, which is another fave. A very stressful fave, but another fave. And then stage 6 is Closeout. Stage 1, I'll be looking at my own bedroom as a case study, and I'll actually take you through the various stages using this case study. I just thought it was the perfect place to start off with because it was my first private project and I was still very green in the game. And so the level of detailing is, well, it's not where it is right now, which is fine, which is great, because then at least you get to understand why it's quite important to have an interior designer on a project, depending on what you're looking for. So I think with anything, I mean, a lot of the times there are certain things that you can do on your own, but if you want to get to a level that is just a cut above the rest, then employ the people who can deliver those things for you. Stage 1, Inception. So when we look at stage 1, there are other subcategories that we look at. And that would be 1 being your client brief. 2, we look at the site constraints. 3, which is a very important one, budget. 4 is your consultants. 5 is program. Last one is the type of contract. Okay, so now let's look at case study 1, which is my dream room. And so I was in my first year of working. What year was that? I don't even want to think about it. So I had a little bit of experience with detailing. I'd been exposed to being on site and dealing with contractors, but I was still very green. I was so new. Okay, so if we look at the brief was basically to renovate my existing room into a sufficient guest bedroom. But at the same time, I still wanted that room to feel a little bit like me. So you'll see as we progress into the stages, my approach on this brief and how I made sure that it was not just suited for guests, but also felt like something that was a little bit like me. Before we get into the side constraints, I just want to show you the existing plan of my bedroom. Yes, the shape is really weird. I do not know what the architects were thinking, and this definitely made reworking my layout a little bit more challenging, and I'm very excited to show you guys how I changed up the layout. I had to consider the side constraints. The house obviously is an existing building. My parents didn't want me to do too much structural work to it because that would mean that I would need to consult with a structural engineer, which means more costs involved. We'd have to go to council, which means time delays, and so on and so on. So this renovation was quite minor. It was mainly quite an aesthetic renovation. We did knock down a non-structural wall just to extend my bathroom just a little bit. I also had to be mindful of first fix points. And when I talk about first fix points, which I'll mention quite a lot, I'm mainly speaking about electrical and plumbing, because those things are quite set in stone because they're in the brickwork. So that means you'd have to chase through brickwork, which means like puncturing holes in the brickwork to allow for like new conduits. It ends up being quite costly. So you want to try and minimize the amount of moving things around as possible. Okay, when we talk about budgets, so for me, budgets are very important. Like, you need to know your budget before you begin. I can't stress that enough. This project taught me that you should always have a budget in mind, because my parents didn't give me a budget and they told me to just be reasonable. You know, like, our tastes are so different, and because I'd been working for a year, like, I'd been exposed to so many different finishes, so many different details, that of course now whatever I was going to specify was going to be of a different kind of standard, which meant that it would be a lot more pricey. You know, you'd need like a more specialized kind of joiner or builder to do certain things. I mean, at that stage, I definitely was not heavily detail orientated. I won't lie. Like, I was just like, I like this, I like that. So we managed to not have the budget skyrocket. However, when I initially did my joinery, for instance, that became a crazy amount. Like, to just put in perspective, just for the joinery alone, so my built-in cupboards and my headboard and my vanity, that came up to over 100 and something thousand rand. Over 100 and something thousand rand because of what I specified. And my parents almost fell off their chair, rightfully so, because that's like a small kitchen, like a very small kitchen. I had to reevaluate. They told me, like, are we not going to pay for this? Like, are you crazy? I had to down spec. The outcome was not exactly what I wanted, but I was quite happy with how it turned out. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's so important to outline your budget from the outset, because, you know, we could specify Ferrari and we sometimes do have these champagne tastes, but our budgets do not allow. And it's so disheartening to put through so much time and effort to specify your dream, whatever it is, and then having to down spec because budget wasn't considered from the get-go. So always consider your budget at the beginning. It will save you a heartache. Consultants. Because this project was very minor, I didn't need consultants, so no structural engineer was needed, no QS was needed because it was such a minor job. So usually in projects you would have your mechanical engineer, your structural engineer, your quantity surveyor to make sure you keep in check in terms of your budget. You'll have your lateral engineers, your surveyors, like the list goes on. It just depends on how big the project is and how many consultants you need. So your consultants are basically there to give you that stamp of approval, or the stamp of approval to council, to say that you've gone through everything and made sure that things are structurally sound, that you are compliant with building regulations. So they are very important to have. The project program didn't really have a timeline for this. The only thing I would say that did push me to move fast was because they were already going through a few bigger renovations in the house. So for instance, we were extending one of the balconies. So now I was getting a new balcony, so we needed a new door, and that affected my original room layout. So that's why actually they decided to approach me and asked what I wanted to do with my room and how I wanted to redesign it. And you'll see as well that I did lose a few windows, which I do regret now. I do not know why I decided to remove those windows and just have a wall, but you will see. And years later, and I'm still really upset about that decision, but it's done now. There's nothing else I can do. There are various types of contracts, and obviously because this project was very minor and it was between myself and my parents, We didn't have a contract. We just, you know, I just issued drawings. I just sent them drawings. Like, I actually gave all the work to my mother. She was like the project manager, running around, making sure things were getting done. I was very lucky to have her to run around and do all that, like all that grunt work for me. But usually for the JBCC, and that's the Joint Building Contract Committee. So the JBCC is mainly there just to facilitate any disputes that may occur. It also just outlines like the things that you do when there's a delay on site, like who's liable to pay, if the subcontractors are performing poorly, like how do you go about certain scenarios, and how do you flesh out these disputes without having to seek legal advice. So the JBCC or contracts are extremely important, and they vary from project to project depending on the contractor you use. So that basically concludes stage 1 of the design stages. I will definitely go through the rest of the stages, and I'll use my room as a case study just for consistency. These types of videos are honestly for those people who are very interested in like the nitty-gritties of interior design and the architectural world, because like I've mentioned before, it's really not all that glamorous. There are lots of processes that we go through, protocols, contracts, etc. So it is quite great to be able to share this with you guys so that you could see that it's not, you know, just always a bunch of fun and just a lot of work that goes into it. So I hope you guys enjoyed my 3rd video. Please stay tuned for the next few videos. Please like and subscribe. Stay safe and sane, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.